Okay, welcome again, everyone. My name is Mike, and I'm one of the committee members at the Bristol Fundraising Group. So today's session is going to be delivered by Max Newton of Sheffield Hospitals Charity, who I believe is still fighting his way through tech problems to get here. But we do also have Lindsay Tilston Jones, our other speaker, who I'm sure will lead us off. So Lindsay is head of community fundraising at Shelter, and we are going to be hearing about adopting an outward mindset and breaking down silos in fundraising. So without further ado, I will hand over to you, Lindsay. I'll put the slides up, and you are welcome to just let me know when you want me to click through those.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mike. And yeah, so at the moment you've just got me, guys. I'm really sorry. And now I can only see Mike. So I could be chatting away into ether and not know what is going on. So do bear with me, but thank you all so very much for coming along and taking the time this morning. And also thank you for inviting us. I say us. Max is having that age-old problem of tech not working. So bear with. He could enter at any point, but let's see what we can say about him while he's not here. So as Mike said, my name is Lindsay Tilston Jones, not Lindsay Shelter as it says underneath me. I am obviously really committed to the cause I'm working for. I have changed my name, but no, Lindsay Tilston Jones, and I'm the head of community fundraising for Shelter, the national charity who deals with the ending the housing emergency and the housing crisis in the UK today. I will be joined at some point, hopefully, by Max Newton, who is the Director of Fundraising at Sheffield Hospitals Charity. And for a bit of context and why we kind of do this together, Max and I work together alongside lovely Julie, who's also on the call here today, and the community fundraising team at Shelter for a few years before Max moved on to another position. And this is part of the work that we did with the Arbinger Institute there. But a few facts about us. And normally we do it about each other. So I'm going to introduce Max first. So when he does turn up, you'll know a little bit about him. So yeah, Max lives in Sheffield. He's from Nottingham and he's a lifelong Nottingham Forest fan. Never say Notts Forest. He will get really, really annoyed. He's been in the fundraising game for over 20 years, mainly dealing in community fundraising, but working across all income streams. Yeah, Max is an avid football fan and also a referee at weekends. So don't cross him. He will red card you. And essentially, yeah, he's just an all-round good bloke, but he does like doing domino rallies and was the domino rally champion in 1989. I know what Max would say about me if I was here, but I'm not going to repeat that. I'm going to tell you actual things about me. So yeah, I'm Lindsay. I work for Shelter, as I said. I'm the head of community fundraising, leading a large, really successful team there in our community team, not without challenges, as everyone is at the moment, but we really do work together as a functional, sometimes dysfunctional family. And most of us have been through the outward mindset training. I've been a fundraiser for, and I'll say this, I started as a child and for 26 years this year in paid fundraising, mainly again in community. Have dealt with a lot of worked with the different charities from really local to internationals, but I'm at Shelter where I've been for 7 years. So next slide, please. So yeah, so what we're talking about today, we're talking about how we have at Shelter and in Max's charity, Sheffield Hospitals, really worked to create a outward mindset approach to our work, which has led to breaking down silos. We all know what it's like in fundraising, especially in whatever type of and size of organisation in which you work. We all know how difficult it can be to sometimes work collaboratively with other teams, whether it be in service provision, in other areas of income generation. You're often so focused inwardly on your own targets because that's what you're there for, that you don't often sort of step back and see everything, see the bigger picture. So we'll be talking about that when this work comes from an organisation called the Arbinger Institute, which is an American learning company and who led our course that we did 2 or 3 years ago now. Several of us did the course as a learning collective with people from across our organisation, in person and online over several weeks, and it really hit home. It really gave us some really great tools. I always say at this point, though, we're not paid or accredited to Arbinger. We are definitely only giving you our views and our snapshot of it. But you know, it's a really good one to follow. So do check them out should anything resonate with you today, and see where it goes from there. But Shelter have really bought into it organisationally, and we've been advocates for it there, and Max certainly has in his new place. Next slide, please, Mike. I'm plowing through these though, Max. I tell you, this is you, you can go to that. So yeah. Um, so yeah, outward mindset from silos to the dream team. And I say dream team with a little bit of a tongue in cheek, but I think, you would, I think the team would agree if we had some more of the team here. We've got Julie, but that you know, we are the kings and queens and champions of collaboration. We kind of have to be in community fundraising, but I feel, have taken it to the next level. And we really have kind of tried to break down those silos. So yeah, I just want you to have a little think. Obviously we're on Zoom, so you can't all put your hands up or shout up, but maybe just have a little think to yourselves, is what do you think is the sort of the best asset, or the most, I suppose, the most valuable asset to you and your team in your work? I'll give you a few seconds. You can pop it in chat. I'm not very good at doing two things at once, guys, so I might not be reading it. But yeah, it's definitely the people, isn't it? So without the people, we couldn't make anything happen. We couldn't do what we do, and we really couldn't get out there and raise funds, make a change, do that. But actually, people are fallible. People work very differently. Everyone's unique and different. Sometimes sorry, my Alexa's just gone off, so that's hilarious. I was hoping you didn't hear all that. So yeah, but with people, there's sometimes a lot of challenges. And if you think about it, how much money, time, and energy can be lost from teams really working either poorly with each other, butting up against each other, being really, challenging with each other? How much time's lost, Not so much nowadays by the kettle or the water cooler having that little bit of a moan and a snipe, or just not going and being your best self in meetings. Perhaps not collaborating on projects and working towards the end goal as much as you could, because you're either not enjoying working with a team, you don't see that the team are giving you something back, and you're concentrated on your bottom line but nothing else. That can really start to embed a culture of distress, of non-collaboration, of siloed working. But really, what happens when that happens is, who suffers? Well, you suffer because you're not coming to a nice and harmonious workplace. You're not perhaps getting the best work done that you could get done because you're not bringing in everybody that you need to do. You're also spending time going around moaning, collaborating, perpetuating perhaps myths about people, getting those in. How much time lost, how much energy is spent doing that when it could be spent working towards the cause, working towards your end goal of having a harmonious workplace, but also of, in our case in Shelter, ending the housing emergency and whatever cause you're in, and fighting towards the goal and the vision of why you're there. The question to most charities and most people, and I'd say both private and public sectors, can you afford for that to continue? Can you afford for so much time and effort to be lost in you working in silos, in you kind of getting into that mindset of being really inward? What does that mean to your bottom line? And essentially, what does that mean to the service and to the cause for which you're working? In that case, we'd say no, you can't afford. Resources are limited, time's limited, and people are limited. So you really can't afford. So you can tell Max has written these slides, you can't afford not to hear that outward mindset. So that's some of the challenges that we're seeking to address. And as I say, you probably won't have all the answers at the end of this hour, but you will have a starting point to think on, and you'll have some things to go away and think about. So next slide, please, Mike. So if we were in person, I'd get you to go away and maybe just have a little think, a few minutes to do this. But if you look at the slide that's on screen now, perhaps if you've got a notebook or a pad in front of you, if we just take 1 or 2 minutes for you to have a think of a person or a team that you've perhaps not been working with so well. Think about who they are and what they did, and what do they do that perhaps doesn't sit well with you or is making you not want to work with them. Think about maybe a scenario of what happened, and then think of how you reacted to it. Maybe what did you do? And then move to the last bottom square there of how did that make you feel? If you could just take a minute or two to jot something down on a piece of paper or on your screen, and we'll come back to it later, but if you have a wee think about that just now. Give it a couple of minutes. I will keep on talking because I don't like silence, but I could sing maybe, or get one of my cats up to show you, but no, have a wee think about that. So yeah.
Can I vote for the singing, Lindsay?
Yeah, I would say no, Mike, because
Okay,
you want people to stay on and you are recording and no one needs to see it. Ask me after a couple of Prosecco's, maybe.
fair enough.
Yeah. But yeah, really have a think about a team or a person that, you're not working with so well. What are they doing? But what did you do? What was your response? Okay, I'm going to move on if we can to the next slide. There'll be plenty of time for questions now.
Lindsay, just to say, I think we do have Max in now. I've just seen him join the
Excellent. Let's
participant
get him
list. So,
in.
Max, I don't know if you can hear or see us, but feel free to jump in if you're here.
Is he around? That's okay. He can jump. Max, you come off mute when you can, and we can dive in. But I've just had people doing the exercise. Right. So let's have a little bit of a background into kind of where we are, where we started. So as I said, I am the head of community fundraising at Shelter, and we have had community fundraising. Oh, sorry, my cat's not going at Shelter since 2018. So we didn't have community fundraising at the very start of the charity back in 1966. Like so many charities, weirdly, we didn't have community. Our new chief exec came in and went, "Why? Why is there no community fundraising?" So well done, Polly. She got me into work. She introduced community fundraising in 2018, and the rest, as we say, is history. But it isn't. So in 2018, I started as the first community fundraiser for Shelter up in Manchester and was there to kind of test the concept. And as I said, I've had a fair few years in the industry, and I was, kind of brought in what I wanted community fundraising to be, what I test it. And I thought I was great at collaborating. We started as a small team, but then we grew. And in 2020, Max joined us as the first head of community fundraising, and our team really grew in different locations across the country attached to our services. So we kind of had to be really great at collaborating to make sure that the people on the ground in our services were coming on board with community fundraising. The other teams in income generation who hadn't seen community fundraising before didn't feel that we were there to kind of take any income or activity or supporters away from them. And to kind of just prove that, we could be there infiltrating at the bottom of the age-old supporter pyramid, bringing people along with our community fundraising model. And as I say, during that time from 2018 through to about 2022, we thought we were great. We put loads of things in place. We had a program called Collaboration Champions. That sounds great, doesn't it? Collab Champions. And it is a really good concept. So, we had teams from different areas of income generation. We're a relatively large charity, so we have different teams for corporate, for high value, for trusts, the list goes on. We had teams from our service provision and our campaigns side to come through together frequently to collaborate, basically share ideas, share planning, work together. And it worked really well. So we thought, but we were all still quite focused, quite silos. We work with our services and our hubs. Our hubs are what we call kind of our local offices. So that's a place where a lot of different areas of Shelter will come together. So our legal team, our services. I won't go into the model, but you kind of get the concept. And again, we were working with an income generation there to collaborate and work alongside each other to complement and to end the housing emergency as the bottom line rather than working in silos. We developed ways of working with other teams. So essentially teams where we might need to share income or share supporters. We really went in quite hard with developing our wows, our ways of working with teams like retail. And we also had a charity-wide program called Beacons. And this was around people who had really keen on like team culture and organisation culture, come together to be the beacon of that culture within their area of work. And again, it's all about, role modelling and going out there with ideas and training. There were lots of really good things in place, and we did some really great work. The reason for the imagery on this slide is one, because Vanilla Rice is an absolute icon. You can tell I'm a 90s kid. We collaborate and listen. There's the silos that we were still working in. I'm very visual, also very basic, it seems, on this slide. And then that slide there with a bit of a graphic from Shelter and Shelter Scotland was showing actually how we'd started to collaborate and kind of break down those bottom lines. So one of the big campaigns that we did, which was a huge collaboration, both for printed materials like this and for campaign materials, but also on the ground, was our wills and in memory work. So essentially two quite different areas, but we got our teams in the community to start doing a community legacy event in their regions. Now, these events wouldn't necessarily add to the initial bottom line for the community fundraisers and were a lot of work to set up, but would contribute overall to Shelter's legacy programme, meaning more legators coming on board, more people leaving money, but also in the long run, perhaps not on the day, the community fundraiser will be able to get a different ask to their supporters, maybe get different supporters over to them through going through the legacy meeting. It was a real key point in collaboration and a real sea change for Shelter. It was not the easiest sell into the community fundraisers. Some really took it on board, and Julie, who's on the call today, is my absolute champion of this and really got it and really went on board. But it's a lot of work. And sometimes we were very, very siloed about it, very, very kind of like inward looking on both sides. And not necessarily in a horrible way, it was just that's the way we focus. I'm going to see if Max is piping up. He said it's going really slow for him. Max, shout if you're not. If not, I'll do this bit. Try and do it in Max. There we go. Max, we're up to the bit where you.
I'm really sorry. Our IT's been amazing since we moved to new offices, and it's just gone completely kaput this morning. So I'm joining on my phone. So can you hear me okay?
We can all hear, well, I can hear you. Yeah.
Amazing. Shall I carry on with from here? What was the next bit?
Yeah, I was going to say we're up to the bit where spoiler alert about the handover, I think. So yeah, you carry on.
Have we talked about the handover?
No, you're going into straight into handover.
Okay. So yeah, so I think as Lindsay was saying, we've done some really good stuff at Shelter around breaking the silos and working with the teams. And often, I was new in post, and often you bring stuff from your previous place. I'm not going to be like that. I'm not going to do this. We'll work better with these teams. And I knew that community and corporate was often a big clash department. And what I needed to do was make the corporate fundraiser, the head of corporate, my best friend. The first two things on my desk when I joined as head of community fundraising was some of the community fundraisers in our team saying, Max, please can you shout at the head of corporate fundraising, because they won't let us talk to all the B&Qs about Kilt Walk or something like this. And or the head of corporate fundraising saying, Max, can you shout at your community fundraisers? They're going wild and talking to all the B&Q contacts about Kilt Walk, and they banked £10,000 of money that should be ours. And so I guess what I want to sort of say is that I made the head of corporate fundraising my best friend, and we worked together to sort of build trust, and for me not to be the head of community fundraising that I saw clashing with corporate at my previous place. It's easy to do that when we start somewhere, or it's easier to do that when we start somewhere and start fresh. One of the best things I did when I started as an aside at Shelter was I didn't read the handover notes that the person that had been looking after the team left for me, and I read them about 6 months later, and they were all, oh, community fundraising can't work with corporate because they won't let you do this. Community fundraising can't work because retail are a problem. Community fundraising can't work because IG is a problem. Community fundraising can't work because the community services teams are a problem, and so on and so on. Actually, they weren't. But what I think is really important to say is once we're at somewhere for an amount of time, we get our own baggage and we get weighed down with some of that baggage. Are we on to the next slide? And I think we'll this is where I'm going to talk about some of that baggage. Somebody did a survey online last year where it said 50% of fundraisers said that their biggest barriers were internal, and I think this is very much still what we found, even though my experience at Shelter was much better in terms of not being siloed than my previous place. We still had them. So we still had like difficulties within our team. We had a central team and we had regional teams. So they clashed and didn't have shared and aligned objectives. We still clashed and didn't have shared and aligned objectives with the events team, which is part of our wider team. And certainly with we also found it with the marketing team, with the brand and marketing team. And yeah, this sort of brought us to outward mindset, whereby even though, like I say, the lack of silos at Shelter was so much better than my previous place and other places, it was still really difficult between those teams and those directorates, and it was so difficult between the income generation directorate and the CPC directorate that held marketing and brand and so on, that an external mediator was brought in to take heads of and directors of those teams away, I think every month for a period of time, to essentially like mediate between the teams and try and find a way of working, because our objectives and our motivations and our red lines clashed so much. It didn't work for like the first 2 or 3 meetings with the external mediator. It only really worked when Chris, who was one of our amazing LNOD leads, brought this outward mindset philosophy and tools, and we worked through those. And I think, just to sort of skip a load forward, now the relationship between income generation and those CPC teams, campaigns, campaigns, communications, and policy teams is brilliant, and they're doing joint planning, just being really honest conversations about where things sit in the calendar and capacity to deliver things. So I guess, like, what is outward mindset? It's aimed at leaders, but leaders in the broadest sense. So leaders could be, so in our community fundraising team, the rank and file community fundraisers who need to work with so many other stakeholders in the organization. And it's sort of starting from that principle of like how much time, energy, money, and people leaving our teams and our organization is wasted by those organizations fighting with each other, let alone how much is not being raised or how much of the cause is not being achieved by working really, really well together. I think the next slide.
Yeah, is that me on the next slide? It is, isn't it? Give you yeah. So we queued up some of this a bit earlier about being the most important asset in your organization is people and those relationships between people and teams. So you can have people being really amazing at their jobs, but there can be those silos and essentially that warfare between teams. We've all seen it because you protect yourself. So this is shown on the slide, on the red sort of, I suppose, visual there. It's kind of, you're being quite you're being inward. You're really looking at what is your team about? What is your thing about? You like, some of the examples Max spoken about there. It's like you can just be so concentrated on your bottom line, your target, your behaviours in your team, that you don't often take a step back to see about the effect on other teams or why other teams might not be engaging with you. So you see from there that visual kind of sets it out. It's quite easy to see on screen. When we've done this elsewhere, it's been really fuzzy, but that can lead to that kind of underperformance. Imagine how much better it'd be if we all worked together. We all say it, but imagine if we actually did it. There's also that lack of commitment, that engagement. Often you just see people leaving. People will just go after the next shiny new job because they think things will be better and greener on the other side, and they just are sick of kind of warring and fighting against things. So you lose really good people, really good ideas. Innovation slows because people just are scared of putting their head above it and going for it. And there can be conflict. And that costs money, it costs time, it costs people. And as I said to you before, why would we want to do that in the charities and the causes that we're working for? So what is it? It's an outward mindset. Sorry, Max, you go for it.
Sorry, I was just gonna just build on that to just say that, like Lindsay said, you can have brilliant people in teams smashing all their targets, whether that be like financial targets or brand reach targets or campaign targets. But if we only focus on our own team's targets, we develop an inward mindset. We can eat so brilliant, but we'll still produce those silos because we're focused on our objectives, and that just produces inevitably produces behaviours that seek to protect our own position. We tend to see in an organisation other people and other teams as a blocker. So like normally when we do this face to face with people, I pick somebody out in the audience. So let's say Laura. Normally, Laura's a problem. She's not letting me do this, so I need to become best friends with Laura. Or we see Laura as a vehicle. I need Laura to help me do this. I need to become best friends with Laura. Or I see Laura as an irrelevance. You know what? Laura says I can't do this. We're just going to do it anyway because our objectives are so much more important. And I think if we're really honest with ourselves, we see that so much in places where we work. What we need to see is see other people's objectives, their red lines, their motivations as equally important. And you know what? Sometimes more important than our own, and to work towards sort of a common objectives. So the first thing we need to address is our own mindset, isn't it, Lindsay?
It is. It's seeing people as humans. One thing that really stood out for me recently, and hopefully she won't mind me saying it. She's not here, so we can. Is my manager was actually saying how she's taken the outward mindset training and put it into play in her family life. And she went, who knew that seeing my children as humans and thinking about their anxieties and hopes and dreams would help? We were chatting about, how that would actually, she's like, so often, she sees the children in the morning as a problem because they won't get ready or get out the door and they're causing her problems. And there's always the objective for getting there. And she was like, no, it's really helped in that sense. And it made me think about some of the stuff that we do in work. And actually, when I was chatting about, you being a referee, Max, I think that perhaps when you're in the match, people might think, the referee, and see you as that rather than as a Max the person. And that can be the case sometimes because that is a vehicle, no objective. But there's ways and means of kind of working around, kind of still seeing the human and the goals and the objectives behind that. And it is about addressing your mindset first and foremost.
That's right. And there's some the further slides, there's some other models, and then we'll talk about some tools that help us to do that, because you might be thinking, well, this is just like being a nice person and not being a so-and-so at work. Lindsay said I couldn't swear today, not being a dick at work. But actually sometimes all of us need some help to do that, and some models to follow and a framework. So can we move on to the next slide?
We did the boxes. Everyone's hopefully filled in something on their boxes from earlier, Max, but I take it over to you.
Cool, thank you. So so you did that box exercise earlier. Hopefully Lindsay stressed we really that you're filling out with at work, or team or person, how that made you feel, what they did, how that made you feel, and then what you did. And a key thing is, if you sort of look at this model, this sort of demonstrates the relations, a circle that we tend to go around. So somebody does something, I interpret that by through my lens, I react. The other person only sees what we do. So I think normally if we're doing this in person, we'll get you to share it with your neighbour, and just share that last box of, obviously you've not got a neighbour, so perhaps share it with a colleague, or a partner or a friend or a child, one of your own child preferably, outside of this, and just say, within this thing, this is what I did. And I think you'll be really amazed by the reaction from that other person. And you can probably get a sense, you're probably thinking now what that reaction might be. I'll give you a real life example of when I did this exercise in the training, in the outward mindset training that we do. And this is all to sort of like understand our role in these relationships that are creating silos. So we had an issue with the marketing team, whereby we didn't think they knew how to market our events. We didn't think they wanted to market our events because they had other priorities. We didn't think they'd done some technical stuff that made it possible around an iOS update. And they were telling us we couldn't have people smiling on community fundraising or community and events adverts, but we needed people to smile. And it was really horrible. and real like breakdown of trust between the teams. So that was what they did. We felt angry and hurt, and you're trying to like stop us from achieving our objectives. And went to bed at night running through all the arguments in our head, etc. What we did, and this is like what I did, was I still had access to back end of the Facebook profile, Facebook account for the charity, and I was able to go in and prove that they hadn't done the things that they said they were doing, which is awful behavior. I also badmouthed them to anybody that would listen in catch-ups and one-to-ones, including like their peers in their wider team. Awful. The only things that the marketing team would see, they don't see how my objectives, because we've not discussed those, or how I'm feeling and so on. They just see that action from me. What's that going to do? Even though we were 100% right and validated in all the things that we're doing, and I proved it. God damn it, I proved it. But actually, we just escalated that problem loads more, and created those silos. Where then the other thing we did was we went straight to, we said, actually, we're going to ignore the marketing team, and we got an external agency to come and run the campaign for us instead, without telling them. Like if I was on the receiving end of that, that'd be horrific. When I did this exercise with colleagues in shelter, even once with some assistant level, do you know what they said? And I'm going to swear, so apologies. They said, "For God's sake, Max, you're a fucking monster." And I think quite a lot of us, when we share that box with somebody else, that's the reaction we'll have. Next slide, please. Sorry, next slide again.
Yeah, next slide, yeah. This is my favourite slide.
So sort of, I don't know if you remember this from the telly a bit
Mitchell
ago,
and
like
Webb.
Mitchell and Webb. Maybe we're the bad guys. And this was sort of the key mindset shift that we all sort of made, that in any of these difficult relationships and siloed situations at work, it's maybe we're the bad guys. And what's our role in it? And how do we address that? And what tools can we put in place to help us address that? Should we go next slide?
Yes. Excellent. So, influence pyramid. So, as we said, you're not going to come away with all the answers, but there will be some tools and some things that you can look up afterwards. But yeah, so now it's not all bad news, guys. And I think it's just about not concentrating too much on that box, but knowing that we're at least 50% of the problem. So, how do you turn your outward, your mindset outward? How do you really change what goes in that last box, and how people like come with you? So how do you become less siloed? I have lost my words there. So yeah, but we'll share some models. So here's a model here called the influence pyramid, and it's basically how you turn your mindset outward. So right now, if you think, a lot of your interactions with other teams, a lot of things that you do can be often to go in straight at the top of that pyramid and correct behaviour. As Max was saying with the example he just gave, the example was really to kind of like go behind their back a bit, prove them wrong, but go in and correct that behaviour, because I'll show you what's right now, and we can have people smiling, and we'll do it from that way. But in going straight to the top of the influence pyramid, you're really kind of making the situation a lot worse, because actually, if you'd kind of gone in at the bottom and worked your way up, we wouldn't have necessarily had to get to that correct point. It would have like been taken into account each other's ways of working, each other's I didn't say hopes and dreams, it sounds very cheesy, but each other's anxieties, each other's pressures, each other's things. And it may well have been that we still needed to get an agency in, but the understanding behind it would have been so much better, and that team would have, like, I suppose, liked, respected, wanted to work with us more, and essentially those silos wouldn't have been there. So the influence pyramid shows here that the mindset actually underpins everything that we do. So if you're going in with an outward mindset of kind of remembering people as people, not as vehicles, as remembering to see people as the whole person, the whole of their work, not just as a vehicle to make something happen for you. And that all starts with building those relationships. So from building those relationships to really getting to know and be curious and find out about a person and their work, you can then start to move up that pyramid. And there's various ways and means of doing that, and some tools we'll come on to in a minute if we have some time, but we can again share them another time there. So it's about building relationships. It's about giving and receiving feedback. It's about creating those really open and trusting environments where you can challenge. You can bring things to the fore that might be really, really peeing you off, but you're having a grown-up adult open conversation about them, which can in turn help to build those relationships and help to kind of move projects along. We do an example from a gentleman called Chip on the course, and it's one that stayed with all of us around that. And I'll try and be really succinct about this, but it's about how sometimes you can't go through all these parts of the pyramid. I realise I'm pointing with a pointer and you can't see me, but you can't go through each of these in turn. Sometimes you might have to go straight to correct if it's an emergency situation, or you might have to go straight in at the middle, but then take the time to do the things underneath that when you have an opportunity to do so. If I do really quickly with Chip, so Chip is an American gentleman. He is a police officer dealing with kind of drugs and gangbang and like the really kind of like rough elements of American society. He's been in the job a long old time, a really experienced police officer, and he was talking about some of the ways that he was working and how outward mindset had helped him. He's talking about one time when he went to a house to do essentially a drugs raid, and they go in and there's a lot of people there with like guns and like really scary people, but they need to like control the situation like immediately to make sure that the situation's safe. And one of those is to get everybody of the alleged perpetrators to sit down. So that controls the situation. It gets everyone to be less challenging. It means that the opportunity for somebody to perhaps, draw a gun or a knife or threaten a member of the team is mitigated against. So they go in, obviously they're going in straight at correct because it's go in, we get everyone to sit down, we make the area safe, and that's entirely appropriate. But there's one of the people in the house who doesn't sit down, and they're like, you've got to sit down, I'm really about to push them down and everything. And the bloke's like, I'm not sitting down. And so both of them are really coming at each other. So one is the sort of the criminal, the perpetrator, the alleged perpetrator, kind of, showing that he's being quite challenging. They're worried that he's going to draw a gun or hurt them. The police are coming in and trying to make them sit down because it's safe. And it's perfectly fine. As it turns out, Chip had done this training, so tries to go in and maybe build that relationship or listen and learn, or even kind of keep on flipping down to the next part of the pyramid. It turns out the man can't sit down because he's got a problem with his knee. And if he sits down in the way that they want him to, his knee will pop out and there'll be blood everywhere and it'll be disgusting, and he'll be like crippled for life. It'd be terrible. That could have happened. The police could have pushed him down and done that and really held that. Chip went in. Max, you might have to jump in at some point. Chip went in and spoke with him, found out about this and said, you can get a chair to sit on. We'll make it better for you. And that diffused the situation. It stopped something horrendous happening to this gentleman's knee, and it made the police officers still safe. But it wasn't. It was sort of going down each level of that pyramid to get to the point where they could communicate effectively. Max?
Here, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was, yeah, exactly that. Like, sometimes you can't, like Lindsay said, sometimes the situation is such that you have to go in as correct, but the outward mindset training would say that correct doesn't work. Drop down a level to teach and communicate. That doesn't work. Drop down a level. So eventually, Chip dropped down to the level where he asked the guy why he can't sit down, and he said, "Yeah, my leg will explode." And on his way home, so he went, "Oh, okay, well, how about if I get you this stool and you can sort of prop up here, and that works for us? Would that be okay for you?" And it does. And on his way home, Chip he reflects about this, and he says to himself, "You know what? If I'd have made him do exactly what we need to do, which is our objectives, his knee would have exploded. We'd have had paramedics in. We'd have had a civil case against the police department. All the police officers involved would have been suspended on full pay. Even if we won that case, which we probably would, it would have cost the city department huge amounts of millions of dollars and a load of stress for everybody. but he solved it by following the principles from the influence pyramid and dropping down a level. But yeah, usually what we need to do is address our own mindset and then build those relationships. And I think if we move on to the next slide,
we can. I was going to say we're running out of time really for like coming to questions. So I'm just wondering, I'll just leave you to whiz through a few bits and then
well, I guess two key tools. One is a meet to learn and one is a meet to give. And I think Lindsay probably said at the start, if you visit the Arbinger website, these tools and models are all written down. But a meet to learn is essentially with somebody with whom you need to get a better relationship. It might be somebody with whom you've got a really difficult relationship. Me and Lindsay might meet to learn. And my role in that, I just want to ask questions and be curious about Lindsay and find out her hopes, her fears, her objectives, what gets her up in the morning, what keeps her awake at night. And it's a really simple tool, but incredibly, incredibly effective. So in that situation, all I'm allowed to do is ask questions and be curious. I'm not trying to seek to push an agenda or prove a point. And I'm also not going, oh yeah, I've got a funny story about that, and it's even funnier, and that kills me because that's what my pub conversations are usually like. And it's a really incredibly simple tool, and we used it. We had that really difficult relationship with the marketing department. Me and the new head of marketing met for a meet to learn, and then we switched it in another meeting, and that moved that relationship on incredibly well from that situation that I described earlier that it was in. We had a situation with the creative team who didn't want to, or we came out of a kickoff meeting around some community fundraising assets and felt that they hadn't read the brief, they didn't like the brief, they didn't want to do it, didn't see the value in it. We were going to have to completely redesign what we're asking from them. I had a meet to learn with the awesome Mads, who was the lead from that team, and one completely changed our relationship because we got to know each other as people. Two, at the end of the meet to learn, she said, "Can I ask you a couple of questions?" I says, "Yeah." Says, well, it's not in the rules. It's not what you're supposed to do, but okay. I said, "You know that project that we're working on, which we'd not talked about for the whole meet to learn?" Said, yeah. You know, instead of doing it like this, can we do it like that? And because we'd had that just a half an hour of a meet to learn, following the strict rules of the meet to learn, I was like, yeah, of course we can. Whereas if we'd have, and it was fine, if we'd have done that in the kickoff meeting or elsewhere before doing that work, we'd have clashed over it and all come out hating each other. She also said, one other thing, what do you do? I said, what's fundraising? What's community fundraising? So I briefly explained like what we do and how we measure and target and so on. And even though she was the lead for fundraising of the creative team, nobody had ever sat and discussed with her what fundraising does. And then as a result, the project went swimmingly, the stuff was delivered amazingly. Everybody had a great time. Everybody worked really well together. The wash-up meetings, we were falling over ourselves for anything that didn't work well, rather than trying to pin it on the other team. We were falling over ourselves. Say, it was probably our fault because we didn't quite explain this, and we didn't communication or such, and that actually allowed both those teams to grow and develop and become better at working with each other and working with other teams. And I know we're running out of time, but Lindsay mentioned about the most important asset in an organization. We tend to think it's people, but I think really it's the relationships between people, because people leave. So I left Shelter, but Lindsay picked up that relationship with the creative team and did some more meet to learns and actually resolved a load of more issues sort of down the line. So the people move and people leave, but that way of working between teams can stay.
It's weird, isn't it? Because for something that's potentially so simple, you probably sit on this call going, this sounds really simple, guys. For something so simple, it's so effective. Both meet to learns and meet to gives. And I've popped our emails in the chat, and there's the Arbinger Institute. I've got, shouldn't say because it's like copyrighted and I know you're recording, but I've got adapted sheets for me, like a sheet telling you what a meet to learn and a meet to give is, and some of the ideas for questioning and stuff around it. curiosity, listening, all that type of thing is great.
And can I just mention the meet to give we did with Andy Harris, who's also awesome, who was is the shelter director of Income Generation, and we did a meet to learn, but we did it the whole 25 people in the community fundraising team and Andy, and they weren't allowed to ask about pay or conditions or things like that, but to get to understand him and know him, and it was a great session. Andy loved it and loved the team as a result. Um, I'm absolutely certain that directly as a result of that, the staff survey results for community fundraising, when the questions around trust in senior leadership, etc., ours were off the scale. Other teams were really, really low. And I've carried on meet to learns and meet to gives here. I did it with my team when I joined Sheffield Hospitals Charity by way of inductions, but also um, with my peers, with the directors of the teams, with our chief executive, and so on. And it's even when I started here, there was difficult relationships between the fundraising team and the brand and comms team, for example, to the extent where one of my team was with me in tears about the relationship and what they could and couldn't do. So building that relationship, but from a genuine standpoint, rather than like I need to build that relationship because they'll help me do this, or their vehicle, their blocker is really key. And I think to say just some other things that it's really done for us, it's really helped our well-being. It's really helped, because we've got a model and we've got tools to help us navigate difficult situations and difficult relationships. And we even employed them in a much larger sense, sort of between community fundraising team and the Shelter Scotland team, which was really sort of almost like organizational relationships that we were applying this to. It helped us in 2023, Shelter went on strike, or 2022, Shelter went on strike. Really, really difficult time. You can imagine, emotions really, really high, etc. It absolutely helped us navigate that incredibly, incredibly difficult and emotional situation. And I think navigate it really well. Everybody came out of it still friends, still happy, not hating each other, and it absolutely got us the jobs that we're in today. So yeah, I'd heartily recommend it. And I think all the things that we talk about as really key leadership behaviors and behaviors in organizations, like giving and receiving feedback, coaching, transparency and honesty, well-being, they all really, I would say, I think Lindsay would back me up, only really work under the umbrella of outward mindset and thinking along those lines.
Back to that pyramid, is your mindset will influence absolutely everything that you do. And it sounds simple, but it's really is developing and tweaking that mindset. For those who maybe know some of our team and stuff, we've had quite a lot of change in the community fundraising team in the last year, in 2024, quite a lot of challenge and change. And I can only speak for me personally in this, but having the tools from outward mindset, having that ability to go back and, look at my influence on things, look at my behaviours and see what people see, but also look at the influence pyramids and the meeting to gives and the meeting to learns really helped to navigate through that process. Wouldn't make the process any easier, didn't make it any less challenging, but actually helped me to maintain relationships, maintain my resilience, but also to lead with openness, with the opportunity to give and see feedback, but also to lead with vulnerability, which I think can often get lost or seen as kind of a weakness at work. And this, it isn't. It's genuine, it's human, it's emotion. So I'd say that's another thing to have a think about within this model. Are we on to the next slide? I don't know how many we've got left now.
I was just going to jump in for a sec, Lindsay and Max. We've got just under 10 minutes to go, so I'd quite like to just have an opportunity to answer questions potentially. I don't know if you want to take a couple of minutes to wrap up, and then if anyone has any questions, feel free to either start raising your hands or pop them in the chat box, please.
I think we're basically wrapped up.
Covered that one.
Yeah, just to sort of back up Lindsay on those difficult relationship situations, and just going back to the boxers exercise, another key bit of it is recognizing our own flags when we're being in a inward mindset, and we're contributing, we're 50% of the problem and contributing to it. If we can recognize those red flags, which might be, I feel really angry, I'm sweating, I'm hot, I want to go out and write a long email ranting at somebody. We can recognize those flags and then modify our behavior. And I used to have a thing on when I worked at home on my window saying, what are my flags? These are my flags. Am I seeing my flags? Am I responding with an inward mindset or an outward mindset? I think probably she might not have had them written down, but that sort of thinking would have helped Lindsay navigate sort of change management situations recently. But I think, yeah,
Okay.
we could definitely do questions.
I was going to say, I'll leave everyone to understand what those pictures mean, but next slide, Mike. Brilliant, there you go. As if we planned it, I tell you.
Thank you so much to both of you for joining us and also battling through tech problems to share your thoughts. That's been really really interesting. Just a request for anyone that does want to ask a question, you are very welcome to raise your hand or use the chat box. And just while we're waiting to see if any questions come in, there are a couple I wanted to ask to kick us off. So I guess a double part question to begin with. But firstly, when you're maybe working with colleagues or team members and you detect that it would be good to sort of start using the outward mindset, how would you go about, I guess, introducing that as a recommendation without offending people and doing that sensitively? And then also, secondly, when you're trying to use it with colleagues, do you sort of explicitly say that that's what you're doing and encourage them to do it as well? Or is it something you do more as a kind of stealth tactic?
I'm going to leave that one to Max for a second because I know this is an example.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And what there's usually a point in the training where somebody says, you know what, this is all very well, but I'm not the problem. It's them lot over there. They need to have the training, whether it be SLT or finance team or somebody else. But almost all the times when we use the tools, the other people or teams hadn't had the training and hadn't gone through it, so didn't really have an idea what it was. What we did was say, look, we've done some training and we've got some models, and it's this thing called outward mindset, and just like to try it. It's a thing called a meet to learn. Do you mind if we give it a go? And it's just about building relationships. So being quite transparent and honest in terms of what we're going to do. I would always like share this Arbinger produced some like template questions, like sample questions that you might ask, and a description of the model, and I'd give it them in advance or at the start of the meeting and say, this is basically it. If you're happy with it, we'll do it, and we'll do it this way, and then we'll flip it. And I think usually people are like, it could be like we've used it when it's not really been a difficult relationship, but it's enhanced the relationship. But also, I think people are aware when a relationship is a bit difficult, and it's just a case of saying. So I'd say like not by stealth usually, but by being transparent and saying, yeah, this is a thing we're working on, and this is how it works, without getting into all the details. And yeah, do you mind if we give it a go? Which I think is best.
Coaching, isn't it? It's like being really open, like you do before coaching and stuff. Yeah.
Thank you. That's really interesting to hear. And I was also just curious, I know we have a lot of people that join these sessions from much smaller organisations, and I know you've talked a lot about sort of communication across teams and departments, and I was curious whether the same principles apply if you're dealing with sort of just a relationship between two key individuals in a smaller organisation, because I imagine they do, but then at the same time, you kind of can't blame the culture so much. It's very much about the individuals, and I just wondered if you'd adjust your recommendations or sort of tools at all to that environment.
I guess that's one for me again, isn't it, Lindsay? So obviously I was with Lindsay at Shelter until January 24, and I was at the British Red Cross before that, which is a humongous organisation, and I'm not sure how many staff at Shelter, like 1,500 maybe, and then I'm now at Sheffield Hospitals Charity, where the charity has 21 staff. So it's very much that smaller organisation. Excuse me. And it's been, I would say, even more useful and even more important here. But a key bit is it's harder for me to avoid feeling like I'm being inward and having the red flags, if that makes sense, because everything's more personal, more one-to-one, more visceral. So it's even more important for me to go, am I in my box? Am I doing the red flags? Am I part? What's my contribution to the problem? And what's the outward mindset way of approaching this?
Isn't it? It's double-edged, because you know what it's like. You're in a big organisation, you think a smaller organisation's easier, and vice versa. But actually, the tools remain the same, because people are people and relationships are relationships. I think it's probably just you might go through it a wee bit quicker in a smaller organisation, and you perhaps go through a few steps differently. I don't know. I mean, it's really. I think I've worked in some small organisations before, and if I'd have had these tools there, it might have been a very different world for me in those organisations. I realise we both sound really evangelical about it, but try it, guys. It will work for you. I'm not going to say it might just work for you. It will work for you.
Brilliant, thank you. And just a final question that I had directly from Laura, who I think has had a laptop tech meltdown and kind of couldn't ask it directly. But just in the shelter context that you talked about earlier, did you see a direct positive impact on income through the outward mindset as well as improved relationships? And if that was the case, would you expect a sort of short lead time, long lead time for that?
It's a really difficult one to quantify, but I'd say we definitely see a bottom line increase in income for something like our winter campaign, which is an integrated campaign. The working together aspect, the lack of silos, has led to that campaign being overall much more successful. And looking at the bottom line situation's been really good. I would say it's not an overnight fix. So I'd say you're putting this in place, and you probably would start to see, it depends on your project, but if you're thinking about it, and you shouldn't because it's not a vehicle for doing that, but if you've got specific projects that you need to work and you want to break down those silos and really make stuff work, then look at this as one of the tools, like budgeting, like planning, that you need to do at the beginning of it to really get those relationships in place and really get you working together in a really great way, but not an overnight fix. Sadly, nothing is in fundraising, is it? So, yeah.
I disagree slightly, Lindsay. I think you're right that there's a lot of things that are more longer term. So, like the example with the creative team around community fundraising assets will be benefiting the team like now and into the future because they can raise more money. But I think two things that jumped to mind were about the Strictly event in Strictly Come Dancing event in Liverpool, whereby I think because we'd employed outward mindset tools and the meet to learns and so on, and we've done them at that leadership level as well, the local community fundraiser could have participants from national partners taking part in that event. I'm thinking like the IKEA guys, for example, and raising a lot of money in that event. And also thinking about we use the tools for in the legacy relationship.
Oh, I went through legacies before you came on, so yeah.
Okay,
but
yeah.
That's on term.
Yeah, so as a result, sort of the organisation was able to account for like about £400,000 of pledged legacy income that it wouldn't have got.
468.
There you go. If we hadn't have taken that approach, and we were seeking to help somebody else achieve their objectives rather than going, it's going to be your community. So I think that's quite a good example of actually quite a short turnaround.
Yeah,
brilliant.
I'll take it. We'll take. Max says we never disagree, but we do.
Thank you very much. Well, on that note, I might move things towards a close. So, firstly, thank you so much to both of you for sharing your time and your expertise today. I know you've both popped your email addresses in the chat box, so if anyone has any follow-up questions that you haven't had time to ask, I'm sure Lindsay and Max will be happy to respond to those. So that's partly me answering on your behalf. Just a couple of things to share before people leave. Three things, in fact. So firstly, I've popped in the chat box a link to a short feedback form from today's event. If you can spare a minute or two to just share your feedback, there's also space to include any requests or recommendations for future events. We do look through all of those forms and kind of plan future events off the back of it. So really grateful if you can spare a moment or two for that. And then just a couple of really exciting plugs actually for things coming up. So firstly, next month's event is coming up really soon on the Thursday, the 13th of February. And it is going to be with Joe Jeffrey, who in my mind has become the patron saint of trusts fundraising almost. Joe Jeffrey authors The List, which is a collection of trusts and foundations that are pausing or spending down or restructuring in various ways, and very generously makes that available for the sector completely free of charge. And Joe will be joining us to share some thoughts on kind of trends in grant giving and things that have come up through that piece of work. So please do watch out for an email on that event coming your way very soon. If you're on the list, it's not quite available to sign up just yet, but it'll be just around the corner. And some of you might also be aware our March event is going to be a little bit different. It's an event called Emerging Voices. So we are going to give 5 fundraisers who maybe haven't previously had an opportunity to speak at sector events or conferences, or don't see themselves and their ideas reflected typically at those events, to do a 10-minute presentation. We'll be doing 5 of those presentations at an in-person event in the last week of March, and everyone who we choose to speak will have the opportunity to be supported or mentored by one of the 5 of us on the committee as well. So we are taking applications to for you to tell us about your idea you'd want to speak about and why you think you'd be a good speaker for that event up until I think it's Sunday the 2nd of February. So I've popped a link to both the feedback form for today and the form to apply for Emerging Voices in the chat box. I've just put them both there again, so they're fresh at the bottom of the list. So please do apply if you want to join that event. I'm really excited about that one, and we'd love. I think we've had lots of applications already, which we're consciously putting to the side and waiting till the deadline to go through. But we'd love yours to be part of that as well. So I think that is everything. So thank you so much again, Lindsay and Max, for joining us today. Everyone is very welcome to connect with either of them on LinkedIn. I know Lindsay said, or again, contact by email if you want to ask a question. But yeah, thank you very much appreciated. We will end the recording there. We're a few minutes over, but hopefully you've still got time to grab some lunch and splash around in the rain. So see you again soon, and thank you again.